Welcome to Suddenly Different, where we explore stories and strategies for life when it doesn't go to plan. I'm Leigh-Anne Charland, inviting you to join me on this journey. What happens when the life you've built, the one you keep running, smiling and showing up for, starts to crush you from the inside? My guest today knows exactly how that feels. Tammie Horton just doesn't talk about resilience. She's lived the kind that's forged in fire. Founder of the PHYNIX Initiative, creator of the PHYNIX Effect, and voice behind the PHYNIX Rebellion, her mission is to reach the high functioners silently unraveling under the weight of pressure, perfectionism and pain. She calls it functional suffering, and she's been there. In 2013, Tammie hit her controlled burn moment, crushed by domestic abuse, workplace trauma, motherhood, mental illness, and the relentless demand to keep going. No one saw how close she was to the edge. So she burned the life that was breaking her and rose. That choice reshaped everything she now creates for others. Her work speaks directly to the highly functional but quietly fading, the ones still here in body but slipping away in spirit. Through her PHYNIX mind coaching and training, she helps people reclaim their fire, rewrite their story, and build a life they don't have to escape from. Today, we explore what it takes to rise from the edge and why burning the bullshit might be the bravest act of resilience there is. Welcome, Tammie. It's fantastic that you're here.
I'm so excited to be here with you today, Leigh-Anne.
I'm hot, like really warmed up. Reading that introduction, I just feel the empowerment coming.
That's good.
Right, let's get into it. Every guest on Suddenly Different has a moment where life split into before and after. What's yours?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because there's so many of them where I've had a split and life before is not the same as the life after. In the introduction, you talked about my controlled burn, and I guess that was the biggest one, which was when I left my marriage of 25 years to start a new life. I decided that I could no longer stay in a relationship where I was being utterly controlled in every aspect and I couldn't be me. And in fact, I didn't even know who me was at that time because I'd become so worn down. And so that moment when I decided that I was going produced like a massive earthquake. It ripped things apart. It escalated a whole bunch of behaviors on behalf of for my husband. And when you look inside his bubble of reality, his entire world was being shifted. Like it was an earthquake for both of us, but I was the instigator of it. When I packed up my car and drove out of my driveway, it was kind of the moment of like, this is it. There's no going back. I've got to continue to build a life that I actually want. And that's been a journey. It's been what now 12 years? Oh no, it will be coming up 12 years since I left. But the last 12 years has been a massive journey of me discovering actually who I am, how I tick, what is it that I really want to do in this world, what life do I want to create for myself, and then how do I want to help other people to then create the lives that they want to create. So yeah, it's was a massive shift.
I think that's really, really interesting. The language that you're using is such like exploratory, claiming kind of language. I'm wondering, when 12 years ago, did it feel like you had any control? Or was it just so much uncertainty?
It's probably one of the biggest leaps I've ever taken. There was no
So Olympic long jump leap?
bigger. It was a Indiana Jones leap into an abyss without knowing if there was anything that was going to catch me type of leap.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there was no certainty at all. And the reason why there was no certainty was because my husband's world was being destroyed. And so he was going to do everything in his power to regain that world. And so there was still not control on my behalf because I didn't know what he would do. There was still,
And there was part of you feeling responsible for his actions as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like even today, when I think about one of those key moments, which is probably on a podcast a little bit too much to share, of one of the moments of that escalation of his behavior, there was a moment where I realized that I had become a human being that I didn't want to be, that it went completely against all of my values. And I still feel responsible for the outcomes that my husband had. He has passed away, in the last 12 years. And, my decision to choose me did cause harm for him in terms of his body, in terms of his health. But there is also all of his responsibility in the actions that he had taken in that. So it's not all on me. But there was that control of it was completely my fault was played out for quite a few years until he passed away. Things were still not fully resolved until 3 years ago. There was always an element of, I don't know what's going to happen, what's going to be the next move that he takes to either try and reel me back in. And there were so many times when I left that it was just like, maybe it would just be easier if I went back. And it probably, in some respects, it would have been easier just to go back, but I wouldn't be here today if I'd done that.
Yes, yes.
So
it feels to me as though deep down, there was the love connection still there, but the behavior in the way and the health in the way. We don't realize how much that health, when somebody has mental illness, the impact on those around you is very difficult and it's infectious.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, Leigh-Anne, is that while ever I was in that relationship, I was mentally unwell myself.
Yes.
Because I was constantly anxious. I was experiencing depression. I was having suicidal thoughts. So I was mentally unwell while I was in that dynamic, probably for a good half of my marriage. I'm someone who doesn't give up, you see. It's that whole resilience thing is I don't give up. Sometimes that's to my detriment because it's just like and that's why the resilience work I do now is so important, because there are so many people out there who are doing things for the sake of just doing them and keeping appearances up, or to not pull things apart because they feel like there's too much of a cost, not actually realizing that the biggest cost is their own mental health, their own physical health, their own ability to live a life that when they get to the end of their life, they can look back and say, yeah, actually, I had fun and I did things that I wanted to do. I don't have regrets. And that would be, it's for me now, is one of the biggest things is I don't want to be on my deathbed with regrets that I didn't live a life that's fully me.
Yes.
And that's not everybody's cup of tea, me. And that's okay.
But everybody has their own individual element, right? And I think that sometimes it's difficult to meet somebody who is very comfortable and clean in their own identity when we are hiding, right? So when we're in this this functional suffering, it would be very confronting to meet somebody who was embracing their change opportunities and embracing the challenge that life is.
Which is what life is. It's a challenge.
That's right.
It's not
That's right.
easy.
We hear change is the only constant that we have. Let's talk about functional suffering. You've described it as smiling on the outside while falling apart on the inside. That would be very difficult to. So I'm curious as how did you realize that that's what you were doing?
Well, at the time, I didn't. And it's really only because of the journey that I've undertaken the last 12 years and getting to understand how my brain functions, how I show up in the world, what my energy states are like, and really paying attention to how I feel. And that's not just emotion feeling, that's also in terms of my body feeling, that I can now look back and say, yeah, I was going about doing this stuff. And my kids say to me, because I've got 3 grown daughters and they're adults and they're making their way in the world. And one of them said to me the other day, Mum, how did you do it? How did you raise 3 kids and be the sole income earner for the family and attend all the appointments with all the medical doctors with Dad and take us to netball and participate and help run the little athletics and work with the school fete and still get promotions in your job? Like, how did you do it? And I look back and I go, I have no clue. I have absolutely no clue how I did it because I was stuck in the functional suffering. I just had to do things. And I could not let anybody see that I was incapable. And part of that, I think, is a lot to do with how I was conditioned growing up. That constant feeling, which it's not just my feeling, it's like probably every single human being on the planet, is that I'm not good enough, you know, that I had to be, and it was something that my mum would say, why can't you be more like Julie? Why can't you be more like Mary? Why can't you be more like, right? So there was this constant growing up of no recognition of, why can't you be more like you? Why can't you be more like Tammie? It was, I had to be more like everybody else. And so that started that whole masking process, right? Well, I have to be more like Julie and Mary. And being more like Tammie is obviously not a good thing. So let's just hide her away in a little part of the body and the brain. She's going to sit in there and just feel like she's trapped in a steel bubble and don't ever come out, right? Because you're just not good enough. So that whole conditioning thing. And so then I had 3 kids. I had a sick husband. If I didn't work, we wouldn't have had a roof over our head. When I had a breakdown and I was off for months, there was pressure on me to get better. There was pressure on me to get back to work. There was no, from my husband, don't worry, take some time, really get yourself right, and then go back to work. There was none of that because I just had to get back to work. And so, but then at work was my happy place, generally speaking, except for the time I had my breakdown, which, because work contributed to it, was one of those final feathers that collapsed everything. But it's just going to work. I had all of this stuff going on at home, but I would turn up at work and I would smile and I would do my job and I would help all the other people. And there'd be moments when I would be really tired and I'd sneak away to the bathroom and I'd have a nap. I'd sit in the toilet stall, put my head on the wall and have a nap just to recharge the battery. I didn't realize that was actually a strategy that was a very good coping strategy because it got me through a whole bunch of stuff, but I couldn't let anybody see that stuff was falling apart until I got a couple of close people around me, and then we had a signal. And so you can't see it in this shot, but I've got a vase of flowers that's got pink, white, purple, and black flowers in it. And so it would sit on my desk. And most of the time, the pink, white, and purple flowers would be facing out into everybody. When the little signal was, I'd turn the vase, and the black flowers would be the predominant flowers that people could see. And so that was the cue to the very close people to say, I'm really struggling today. So just be a bit gentle. And sometimes it'd be someone would say, how are you going? And it would bring forth a flood of tears. Some people would know how to handle that. Some people wouldn't. But I'd have to quickly wipe them away because I couldn't show that I'm not coping. But internally, I was exhausted. I was super anxious. I struggled. If you'd gone to my house, there was someone that I came across in, my very first foray into personal development. She was called the Fly Lady. And she talked about having a house in chaos. And it was an acronym, which I now realize that, acronyms are just my life. Everything I build has an acronym. But the chaos was can't have anyone over syndrome. Right? Because the house was it was chaos. There was just piles of clothes everywhere, dishes everywhere, and just so much. My house represented what my internals looked like, but at work, no, everything was neat and tidy because I couldn't show. So I guess it was that, and I couldn't. I'd have to keep going. We've got the school fete, right? I've got to keep going and doing that. Got to keep going and doing that. And so it's a no wonder that when I did have my breakdown, it was probably a whole bunch of neurodivergent burnout, as well as just a complete shutdown of my system because I couldn't anymore. I had no reserves in my battery. I had no safe place to go to build that reserve. So yeah, and I don't want other people to get to that point where they're at a decision point, which I call now the state of no return, right? Which is that decision point of life is too hard. And so I only have one way out. I don't want people to get to that point because there are other ways. It's just we get to a point we can't see any of the other ways. So it is a decision point. You can choose to not be here anymore, to end your physical life, or you can choose to end the life you're living and build something different. And that's really kind of at the heart of everything that I'm about, is sitting with people in that state of no return.
Yeah.
With them so that they can see that there is another choice, and I'm a representation of that. But it's not easy. It's very, very hard, very scary. But when you have support, it's much easier. And so many of us do dysfunctional suffering alone because we think that nobody would understand. But when you actually start to open up a little bit, there's so many of us out there that do this functional suffering thing. And when we start to talk about it with other people, it's just like, man, you feel this way too? Well, what do you do to get through the day? And then you start to learn different strategies. Some of them are helpful, some of them are harmful, but the more you hear about the helpful things, the less you engage in the harmful stuff. But yeah, it's a very long-winded answer to your question, Leigh-Anne.
In 2013, you reached your control burn moment where you chose to let go of the old life. What did that cost you, and what did it give you?
It cost me a lot of money in terms of legal fees. And like I said, it was years of legal fees because my ex-husband passed away 3 years ago. And right up until when he passed away, we were still going through legal stuff. So it cost me an awful lot of money in regards to that. It cost me friendships because there were friends that we would see together as a couple, and I knew that my husband would need supports. So I withdrew from those friendships because he would need them more than I did. I did have a couple of friends, and I had some work friends. So I had some of those supports around me. It cost me a lot of my stuff because I couldn't fit everything into my car. So there were some very sentimental things that I couldn't take with me that stayed in the house. And then when he passed away, and we had to deal with the house, with my daughters, we dealt with the house. I'd already grieved all the stuff that I'd lost. And then I had to go back into it and then re-grieve it all because I was back into it and then having to sort through it all. There was a whole bunch of grief and loss around that stuff. It cost me some of my pride because I had to go to my mum and say, can I live in the family home? Because my dad the family home had been standing empty for 16 years. My dad had passed away 16 years prior, and mum had kept the house just in case I needed it. But the relationship with my mum was not great because of the whole relationship dynamic, and she'd never wanted me to marry him in the first place. There was 27 years of all of that stuff. So I kind of had to let go of my pride and ask if I could live here. And that came with an emotional toll because then there were expectations that I would ring her every week, that I would pay all the bills, which is fair enough. I pay all the bills, but I was still paying for all of the bills at my old house. I was paying for 3 mortgages, the health insurance, like I was still paying for one household, and there was very little money left over supporting that household, let alone supporting a second one. So thankfully I was paying a small amount of rent, but there was all of this expectation stuff, right? And then when I couldn't follow through because, hello, I was in the midst of a breakdown, like a complete re-rising, I wouldn't ring for weeks. And then I got a letter in the mail one day from my mum that it was time that I looked for somewhere else to live because I wasn't keeping up my end of the deal. So the relationship, it cost me some of that relationship, and because I then got very angry at her, redirecting the anger from my ex-husband to my mother. So that it cost me a lot in regards to that relationship, which thankfully we repaired. We had some peace talks and in a neutral location, and there was a family friend who was a mediator, but I call them the peace talks because it was from that point that we kind of rebuilt our relationship, which was lovely. It cost me a sense of safety too, because I was always on guard. He would stalk me. He would park his car outside the house. One of my daughters was still doing like a 50-50 between me and him. So she had a key to my house. He would steal the key from her and get a key cut, and he would come inside my house when I wasn't here. And I'd know this because he'd send me messages about things that were in the house that I'd only just purchased. And not big things, but little things like a book. So a sense of safety was a loss. But what did it give me? My freedom. It gave me the opportunity to explore, to find out actually who I am in the world. And it's quite funny because my girls, I kind of went through a second teenagehood, I guess, because my husband was my first ever serious relationship. And so I'd never really dated, never explored around intimacy. So yeah, I kind of had a second teenagehood. Learned an awful lot through that process. And I did stupid things like teenagers would do, not wise choice. I should say not stupid, but not wise choices. Luckily, it all panned out in the end. But I got to understand who I was. I pushed myself. I was well and truly out of my comfort zone. Like I said, it was that Indiana Jones leap. I went to meetup groups with people that I didn't know, so I had to learn how to interact with humans on a social basis. And I've built a database of 276 questions to ask people when I'm interacting with them, so that I could actually seem interesting and be interested in others. Funnily enough, that database has grown to 476 questions now because I've grown and I want to know more. But it just gave me an opportunity to really let my wings out and to grow and be the version of me that I am today, which is constantly evolving. I'm always learning new things about me, but it's given me the ability to make choices for myself. And if nothing else, that's super powerful. Yeah, the old life still draws me back, even though he's not alive. It's still like I still go back to some of the behaviors that I had back then. That's just because those neural pathways in my brain haven't fully been like neutralized. That's okay, because the going back into some of my old behaviors actually teaches me a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. And I think if we do look at our default neural pathways, where we go back to survival first lent, right? I don't know. I've got lots of different analogies in my mind about vinyl records and the grooves in the vinyl record. And I sort of think about those grooves compared to our neural pathways and how we can have scratching across those grooves and I can play around with the real mechanics and the Leigh-Anne mechanics of how vinyl records get created and how heavy those grooves get. And I look at your speaking about burning the bullshit, right? To me, that's scratching the record. It's getting rid of those old habits, those old safe behaviors that are pretty unsafe, really, and claiming our new ridges, our new songs. How do you feel about burning that bullshit? Reclaiming.
It's quite interesting because there's always the part of me that I care deeply about humans, right?
You do.
I really do care deeply about other humans. And so for me, it's very easy now to say, I'm going to burn that bullshit. The narrative that goes on in my head sometimes, negative Nelly, she very rarely pops up these days because she's just full of bullshit. She just tries to, and again, bullshit is an acronym. And I won't go into what all of them are, but sometimes the B stands for Band-Aids, right? We just stick Band-Aids on things all the time, and that actually doesn't really fix anything. So it just covers things up. We've got to rip the Band-Aids off sometimes. One of the L stands for lone wolf thinking, that you've got to do it all by yourself. And there are times where, yeah, you do have to go it alone because maybe your idea is a little bit beyond other people's thinking. Maybe it's too new. And sometimes you've got to go it alone to actually work out, no, well, this is actually what's valuable for me. But in terms of when we're struggling, no, there's no lone wolf thinking in that. You need a tribe around you to get through that stuff. So there's kind of those things. It's very easy for me to do now for me. When I look at it and say, oh, yeah, no, that's bullshit. Or I'll hear someone talking and it'll be like, that's bullshit. Because that's just one perspective, right? You're just sharing one perspective. It's not the full 360-degree view of this thing. So don't be speaking that stuff because all you're doing is showing one side of things. So it's very easy for me to say, hey, yeah, and I just burn the bullshit down because I've gone beyond that point. But then when it comes to other humans and when they're in that really deep sense of distress, me going in and saying, well, you just got to burn the bullshit, right? You just got to just rip the Band-Aid off. Like none of this, like you can't say that to people with the attitude of and what's the word I'm trying to think of? A cavalier. It's like, oh yeah, no, well, you just got to do that. Like without that care, right? Because burning the bullshit on a personal level is a really difficult thing to do.
It's really hard when you are raw in that crisis state. Well, it's very difficult for you to understand what's real and what's there to make you safe, and then what is imagined, and even what's helping you.
Yeah.
Right. So to be cavalier, I we can't be that. We can think cavalierly. That's not a word, is it?
I don't think so, but let's go with it because I'm always about creating new words.
But yeah, so we can go forward, but it is understanding the amount of care, because I don't know about you, but for me, when somebody is allowing me in their space, when they are at such a vulnerable time in their lives, it is such a precious gift to be able to hold someone. It is so, privilege is not the word. It is beyond privilege. And even though it's hard and it's messy and it's yucky and sad, so for those who run away from people who are having it hard, maybe if you step in, see what it's like.
Yeah. And that reminds me of, I've heard a story of Simon Sinek, and he talks about 8 seconds. And he said that he would have a friend that was having a hard time, and they felt like they reached out, but they didn't really. It was that vague, the functional suffering language of, I'm going to try and reach out because I'm struggling, but I'm not going to tell anyone that I'm struggling, but I'm going to reach out because then hopefully they'll connect with me. But we miss the signals, right? Because it's not expressly said, I'm struggling, I need a hand. So, and then Simon said, if I'd actually realized, I would have called you. So now they've got this deal in his friendship group that if someone sends a text message that says, hey, have you got 8 seconds? Right? It's a bit like my flowers. It's just like, I really need some support right now. And it's a drop everything because the person needs it. One of the people that's in my life, we've agreed code red. And so if I get a code red, nothing else matters. I drop absolutely everything. Even if I'm about to step into a meeting with people, I'll let the people know, I'm sorry, I can't attend. I've got something that's vitally important that I attend to, because a code red is that state of no return. And to be able to sit in that space with that person while they're going through that, so that they can at least just re-regulate.
And it is about regulation. It is about that body sensory regulation as well as the emotional state and the mental state. We think of regulation as just 3 deep breaths. It's a little bit more than that.
And so when it comes to the bullshit stuff, then is when I get to know people a bit better, I can say to them, I'm calling bullshit, you know, stuff from the acronym. There's something in that, what you're talking about, that you've got to burn away, right? And whether it's that getting stuck in the story of that it's always going to be this way, it's never going to change, this always happens, like that, the story that we play out, a bit like your record analogy, that song that we just play over and over and over and over, and the brain gets used to the story. It's because that's how the brain operates. And so sometimes we do have to call bullshit. It's just like, no, I call bullshit on that because there's something different that you can do. For some people, I can say it outright, I call bullshit. For others, I'm going, so, and then I use my coaching language, right? Is there something in what you're sharing with me right now that potentially we could explore a bit more to see if we can shift it? It's a much gentler language, but I have to have an acronym that I can operate from, because that's how my brain remembers things. So let's have a look at what the bullshit stands for, and let's see if it's something that's in that mix that we might need to shift, burn down, or just dampen the oxygen that the fire's got so that it's not burning quite
Yeah,
so brightly, whatever
yeah.
it might be.
I know that before you showed me that you've got a bag with stuff in it. Is that your emotional go bag?
It is. So So I can share with people, it's actually a pencil case, right? So it's got my name on it. And it kind of started, I'm going to sit it here and I'll tell you the background to it first. When one of the times in my life, one of my children was struggling a lot with her mental health. She was going through dialectical behavioral therapy. We went through that as a family to learn new skills. And one of the skills in that is a thing called a safety box, or a safety toolkit. And what it is things that can help you to regulate when you're feeling very distressed, and particularly for some of the experiences that are quite common for a lot of teenagers. They think about self-harm. Instead of self-harming, they go to their safety box. That's kind of where I first heard about this. And then I deliver programs with another organisation here in Canberra to year 3 students. And we go in and we talk about our self-care pencil case. Self-care pencil case. And so this is the one that I take into that program because it's for year 3s, but it's also for me. What have I got in my self-care pencil case? I've got 2 puppets, Wilbur and Daisy. Sometimes if we're having a difficult decision, Wilbur and Daisy will have a discussion about the pros and cons. It's me, but having a play. I've got my little friend Buddy, who he can just sit on my hand and I can just have a friend with me all the time. So he kind of adds to the other ones. I've got some fidget toys, squishy things and stuff that can rotate around. I've got a box of Lego. I've got a fluffy eye mask. I'm very sensory when it comes to fluffy stuff. So I like to pat things. What else do I have in here? I've got an emotions wheel. So how am I feeling today? If I can't name it, I can look at it and go, which has helped expand my language around my emotions. And my all-time favorite self-care thing, bubbles. Bubbles. So bubbles are the most magical thing on the planet, and that's probably another whole podcast altogether. This is my self-care pencil case. What I talk about with emotional go bags is when you're feeling activated, and I use the word activated, so you're starting to feel tension in your body, you might feel your heart rate starting to increase, getting hot, sweaty, like you're starting to feel like, or there's this internal pressure inside, you need something to regulate. What do you have as some emotional support things that you can just pull out to help yourself regulate if there's no one else around? Now, you may not want to carry around a self-care pencil case like I've got. And to remember to carry that around all the time is, for me, is a bit challenging. I have an internal emotional go bag so that when I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I can't get back to sleep, I've got some things that I can go to help quieten down the brain, because it's started on the tracker. What else do I have to do? And we're thinking about all sorts of different things. So emotional go bag things for me are breathing techniques, havening techniques. So just being able to make myself feel comforted, music, sticking a piece of music on that feels the way I feel or how I want to feel. It might shift. Dancing like no one's watching, picking up the phone and talking to a friend. What other things do I do? I hum. I make silly noises to vibrate the throat so that it stimulates the vagus nerve. These are all things, just closing my eyes for a few moments. And if my brain's like really struggling, and this is a go to sleep technique, when my brain's just constantly, it just doesn't want to switch off, then I employ a strategy of think of a word. Let's say umbrella. And then I have to think of a word for every letter of umbrella. So underwater, menace, blah, 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 blah. You get to the end, the last word, the A, and then I've got to think of a word for every letter of the word that was starting with A. Pretty soon, my brain's, all the chatter's gone, and I'm asleep by about the 10th word, because the brain gets bored and it's just like, this is not what we were doing. So, but that just helps with that technique. So we need to build emotional go backs. Part of it's building our emotion language around emotions. So not just using happy, sad, fine,
Fine.
Freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional is what fine stands for in my book. So when people say fine, I go, tell me more. But, so expanding that language, do I feel frustrated or do I feel enraged? Right? Because if I feel frustrated, that's a very different neurochemical process going through my body as opposed to enraged, right? There's far more adrenaline involved and cortisol involved in enraged than there is with frustrated, right? Because frustrated's easier to shift to determined, and so then you're giving yourself more dopamine and serotonin when you shift into determined. Having that language, but having some things that you can grab on the fly, like the nap in the toilet.
Yes. Yes.
Giving yourself permission to pause just for a few moments to help yourself regulate. So that's what I mean by emotional go backs, because otherwise, if we don't build our literacy around it, if we don't have tools that can help to regulate this process that goes through our brain when we get activated, we turn to things like alcohol, substances, gaming, food, shopping. We turn to things that are trying to numb out the feelings and avoid the feelings rather than to feel the feelings and move through them.
Yes. Yes. One of the things that I used to use in the workplace was a bottle of water. So I would have a bottle of water with me when I went into meetings and use that, especially if I was feeling that a question was being asked of me that caused my heart to jump into my throat. I would have a drink of water to calm myself down before I answered. These tools that we can use instead of using food or alcohol or other harmful things are a wonderful support. And I think that it, as you said, it is a unique individual thing that you need to plan. I normally wear a crystal necklace, and that is my first go-to place. So when I'm needing support, I may even be holding it before I realize that I'm needing support. It's like my hand knows first.
Yes.
And I feel naked because I haven't got it on. So this is just an amazing conversation. And I think that it's very important for us to talk about the things that you've developed to be able to share with others, right? And the kind of people, and we talked about them earlier, the people who were suffering in silence, can't remember the exact words, but the people who are soldiering on and pushing themselves through with a smile on their face, but there's no zip in their step, right? So how does the PHYNIX umbrella help with that?
Yeah. So that people get a sense about what the PHYNIX actually means for me is it's an acronym. Surprise, surprise. And it's spelt differently. Surprise, surprise. I love creative spelling now, although I am in saying I love creative spelling when it comes to spelling mistakes and grammar. Like I'm a bit of a grammar hound, which is quite funny because people then say to me, oh, you spelt it wrong. Yeah, no, I didn't. But anyway, so it's an acronym. So the way I spell PHYNIX is PHYNIX. And it stands for passionate. Live as if you're on fire from within. Hopeful, because once you choose hope, anything's possible. Y is young at heart. Be open to new opportunities and develop a beginner's mind. There's noetic, which is a Greek word, and that stands for inner wisdom. So it's about trusting your inner wisdom because you're wiser than you think, right? Because the brain gets in the way. The I is for indomitable. And so that's all about bravery, taking positive risks, and courage. in the face of difficulty, and extraordinary, which is why I fit in when you were born to stand out. Each one of us is unique. We have unique fingerprints. We have unique brain structures. We have unique, and how we play out in life builds a very unique person. So let's own that. What we were born to be gets conditioned before it can never really form. So it's about trying to find out what you were born to be. And some of that's a little bit of the, astrology, human design, woo-woo stuff. But what I've learned is that in amongst all of the supposed woo-woo, the science is now proving the woo. And so when you compare it, like I talk about my human design chart. So in terms of human design, I'm a manifester. We're a very small percentage of the population, and we need a lot of downtime. Hello. I need downtime. I need to recharge my batteries. It's by 2:00 in the afternoon. If I feel like I need to close my eyes, I now honor that and go and close my eyes, because then when I wake up, I'm on fire, right? The stuff in my human design report matches my Gallup strengths. It matches my Myers-Briggs profile. It matches the Herman, whatever the Herman's thing is. Any of the more scientific, psychological based tests I've taken, it all says the same thing as my woo things. I prefer the woo. Let's go with the woo. That's the banner, right, of being a phoenix, being passionate, hopeful, young at heart, noetic, indomitable, and extraordinary. I believe, and that's my life principles. Am I being passionate about what I do? Am I actually being myself? What can I learn in this process? Yeah, things are looking a bit tough right now, but I'm going to hang on to hope. And it was in those controlled burn moments, the times where I was really struggling, is I had to look for embers of hope. I call them embers of hope because I didn't have any. I'd have to look for it elsewhere. And that was in my friends. It was in situations that would arise. So, and they would be the things I've got an ember. I'm going to hold on to that one because that's going to help to create the spark to light my fire back up again, right? And so that's how the phoenix plays out in everything that I do, because I then become an ember for other people. So when they have no hope, when they're not passionate about what they're living in, when they're very stuck in the story and they don't see any other possibilities, where it's too scary to be indomitable and they have no clue, like I didn't know who I was born to be, I can be that ember for them, that I can sit in a burnt out fire, because sometimes even in the burnt out fire, there's always just that tiniest little bit, and you just give it a bit of oxygen and that ember turns into a spark, and that can reignite, and you give it a bit of fuel, and then pretty soon you've got the fire roaring again, right? So that's how it plays out for me, is that I become an ember for other people in those moments. And then I look for the things that I recognize about me back in the past. And I go, I can relate to that component of what you're going through right now. And I understand that this is really hard for you and that you feel like the world's against you. And it's okay to feel that way. And I think that's the essence of what I've learned through all of my self-development stuff, with becoming involved with the alternatives to suicide movement. It's about really being able to sit with someone and saying, I see you, I'm hearing you, I feel you, and just right now it's okay to feel the way you're feeling, given everything that you're going through, given the experiences you've just had. It's okay to feel all the emotions that you're feeling. I'm not going to tell you it's wrong. If you feel happy about something, then be happy about it. If you feel angry about it, be angry about it. I'm not going to tell you any emotion's wrong. It's how we use the emotion that can sometimes be, like I said, unwise choices. If we stay, particularly the negative emotions, if we stay stuck in the story, then it becomes an unhelpful emotion. But it's just, so that's kind of how the phoenix all plays out. It's just, I become an ember for other people. And as a manifester in human design speak, I'm an initiator. I am the spark. So when I come into a person's life, there is a reason, and I wholeheartedly believe that there is a reason why the universe has put me into someone's life when they're in distress, because I'm going to spark something in them that's going to make their life different. And I've seen it play out in a lot of people that I've engaged with. Part of the manifester, and it's the kind of, this is why I get a smile on my face, because in human design speak, manifestors are the master of life and death, because we're constantly starting things and ending things, starting things and ending things. Where, because of our energy cycle, we'll start stuff, but we're not the doers of the world. So we'll start it and then we'll walk away from it and I'll let someone else do all the doing. There's been some relationships that I've had in the last few years. I've sparked something in them. They're now living a lifetime dream, but now it's like, okay, you're living the dream now, so I'm going to walk away. But then there's that part of me that doesn't want to give up, that goes, oh, this is really hard to walk away from, because it's my trauma response. Because the last time I walked away from something, there was extreme behaviors, someone else's world collapsed, all of this. So I've learned a whole bunch about how do I go about those processes differently. But yeah, I'm the spark, I'm the ember that's going to start shifting things in people. And I'm not going to say it's easy. It's messy, and it's sometimes there's going to be a lot of emotions that you don't want to feel, but you have to feel them in order to shift them, because you've got to get them out of your body. Anyway, again, a long-winded answer to your question.
So if someone was listening right now who is in corporate or just privately in their own growth cycle, if someone was listening right now that is quietly falling apart but still doing fine on the outside, what is the one step that you would suggest to them to begin?
One step is just to stop.
Just to stop.
Just to stop. Stop what you're doing and give yourself the honor of being with yourself, in a moment of calm. And that could just be 10 seconds.
And if you were able to look back on the version of you in 2013, when you made that brave, courageous decision in amongst the tumultuous time, what would you whisper to yourself?
I would whisper to her that she is an amazing, strong, capable human being who is going to learn so much about how the world operates and how she operates in the world, that she will have an amazing life despite the turmoil, that she's going to make a difference in the world, and that everything that you go through, like whispering to her, everything that you go through is going to help someone else. You've just got to keep being courageous and sharing your heart, sharing your mind, and being the phoenix.
That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. And as you've been a friend of mine, I have been blessed with having you at my side at times when things are rough and the world seems a hard place. Knowing that you're in my corner has made me feel that it can be okay. right? There is potential. So I invite anybody to reach out to Tammie, and I will put Tammie's links in the information about the podcast so that you can know about the services that she offers and get to know this amazing woman. What I love about Tammie's story is that it's not a shiny, neatly packaged comeback tale. It's raw, it's real, and it sits with you long after you've heard it because it reminds you that resilience isn't about pushing harder, smiling wider, or pretending you're okay. If today's conversation has stirred something in you, maybe because you recognize yourself in functional suffering or you've been holding on by a thread, please know that you're not alone. You can connect with Tammie through the links, explore the PHYNIX effect, or simply start with that one small act of care that she mentioned. Maybe create your go bag. Because sometimes the most radical things you can do is stop breaking yourself to survive. Thank you for listening to Suddenly Different, Stories and Strategies for Life When It Doesn't Go to Plan. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next conversation. Thank you, Tammie, from the bottom, top sides of my heart. You are amazing, and I thank the universe that you are here.
It's been an absolute honour to be a part of your journey, Leigh-Anne. And I just, emotions. I want to leak now. My eyes want to leak. Thank you for inviting me. I love being a part of your life, and I'm so excited for everything, the possibility that's in your life and for your listeners' lives.
Thank you.
So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Tammie. This has been Suddenly Different. I'm Leigh-Anne Charland, and I'm so grateful you shared your time with me. If you felt a spark, a tear, or a moment of recognition, I hope you'll pass that gift along by sharing this show. Take a deep breath, trust your path, and I'll meet you back here soon.